There is a boom underway, and it's promising America a brighter, more independent future.
It's probably going to be the largest oil field in the history of the world.
Tapping into these giant reserves has just made America the #1 crude oil and natural gas producer in the world.
We have unleashed a revolution in American energy.
Today, the politics and profits from the new boom in American oil.
Some people do research in American institutions strictly to spy for their country.
Are there any particular countries of concern, more so than others?
My suspicion is China.
Only 15% of the OCO budget is going to direct war spending. When you think about it, that's crazy.
A look at an outsized and undermanaged Pentagon budget.
OCO has been used as a slush fund, and it's really a way of cheating.
These graves in some way connect to George Washington's family.
And it's possible to find history hidden in plain sight. Descendants of America's first family may be buried in the parking lot of a shopping center.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. We begin with an amazing American economic story you probably haven't heard much about. The U.S. has become the world's largest producer of crude oil, defying many predictions. And the impact goes way beyond our oil fields. It's a big stick that can be used to influence international policy. The heart of the black gold rush is West Texas, where Scott Thuman reports on the big boom.
There is a boom underway in West Texas. One so loud, so impactful, the entire world is paying attention. Where aging skylines are making way for the new. Because underneath this ground, a discovery that's changing the global energy game and promising America a brighter, more independent future.
By the time it's done, it's probably going to be the largest oil field in the history of the world.
Ray Perryman is an oil analyst and expert who spent a lifetime studying the industry's boom and bust cycles. 10 years ago, they thought they might be on the verge of running out.
Right, yeah, production had fallen by 67%.
Not only did it not run out, but due to technological advances in horizontal drilling and fracking, this field is now producing more crude oil and natural gas than any other single spot on the planet. And now they think they've got perhaps centuries worth.
Absolutely.
That's a staggering development.
It's staggering. It's total. I've been in this business 40 years, and I'm a student of the history of it for several centuries. And it's truly a rare event to see something like this happen.
This 86,000 square mile swath of land, known as the Permian Basin, stretches from the Rio Grande into southeast New Mexico, possibly containing a mind-blowing 46 billion barrels of oil. Tapping into these giant reserves has just made America the #1 crude oil and natural gas producer in the world, outpacing Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran. A far cry from the past when America's reliance on other nations for energy brought panic at the pumps, like the gas shortages of 1973 and again in 1979, as America lined up just to fill up. Those days, it seems, a distant speck in the rearview mirror.
We have unleashed a revolution in American energy. The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas anywhere in the world.
With that independence, President Trump has been free to impose sanctions on oil-rich nations like Iran and Venezuela without worrying as much about the prices here. A budgetary boom is especially felt in Texas, since much of the land here in the Permian Basin is owned by the state, which leases, taxes, and profits richly from it. Overseeing it all, the General Land Office and its elected leader, a man whose family name you've heard before.
There's some estimates that put it by 2025 to be exporting upwards of 8 million barrels a day.
More than Iraq.
More than Iraq, which is extraordinary to think about. I remember when I graduated from law school in 2003, my law professor said, this is a dying industry, we won't be producing anymore, and you don't have to worry about that issue on the bar exam. So to go from a complete paradigm shift from one generation to the next is it's truly astonishing. The permanent school.
The son of Jeb and nephew of George W. Bush, George P. Bush, can't stop smiling for other reasons too. The Texas political dynasty has deep roots in oil country, once calling Midland home.
Some research shows that the average Texan that's employed in the oil and gas industry makes about $130,000. That's about twice the national average for most average salaries. Most of these jobs, so the Wall Street Journal put out an article recently that said that a barber right now in Pecos, Texas is making $180,000. Commercial drivers are making in excess of $150,000, some without high school degrees, maybe with GEDs.
And even then, employers from trucking companies to fast food joints are struggling just to keep up with all that action. So workers from across the country are flooding in, like Chris Woods and Thomas Claiborne, who came from Louisiana. They're just two of thousands here. What drew you guys out here?
The money.
The money, yeah.
The money.
The money.
It's definitely not the scenery.
Both pulling in six-figure salaries on the oil fields where 80-hour weeks are common. It's pretty fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, you know, you ain't got to have a high school diploma or anything.
No.
You just know how to have a good work ethic, that's about it. And sometimes you ain't even got to have that as long as you show up on time every day.
Yeah.
Alongside the oil derricks, man camps, pop-up villages like this one housing 800 workers, and more on the way.
There's just this sense that there's always something going on out here 24/7. You've got the pump jacks, you've got constant drilling, and this parade of large trucks moving people and equipment back and forth. You can feel the action and almost hear the money being counted.
The Midland man at the center of it all and under pressure to manage it is Mayor Jerry Morales.
So we need workforce housing, we need doctors, we need nurses, we need teachers, we need everybody in Midland, Texas to help us with our growing education, healthcare, city, county. I mean, it's just nuts.
In an area they were racing to once build one new home a day, he says they need federal help to capitalize on and control this rush.
We need to see President Trump here.
Why would it be important for the president to see this firsthand?
We're 15,000 workers short just in the oil and gas industry. Our road fatalities are at a record high because our infrastructure is stretched so thin.
For Gene Collins, these economic good times can be bad ones for locals. The Odessa pastor who preaches more than just religion sees danger in the night sky. When you see that flame, what does it mean to you?
That somebody's health is going to be affected, that the climate change factors are being expended into the air, that somebody's going to suffer. It may not be tomorrow, but there may be a heightening of a blizzard somewhere, or an ice cap is melting.
You've got environmentalists, you've got a lot of people out there who worry about everything from fracking to, as you pointed out, flares, to just having the extra pollution of more trucks on the road, more transport. Do you think you've got a good enough grip on managing that?
We do. We have a philosophy of engaging these issues head on rather than being reactive and waiting for outside groups or citizens to call these developments into question.
If we ask the state, they would say it is regulated, it is being monitored, it is being watched.
We have a lot of self-policing out here. Historically, we know that that doesn't work. It's like giving yourself a ticket for speeding. It's impractical.
It is, both sides say, a balancing act. They've seen their share of tough times when the fields seemed tapped out, when it cost more to pump than it was worth, jobs disappeared, and people did too. But those days are long gone, and if the predictions are right, this boom could outlast us all.
Any way to know if this is really going to last?
Well, more proof that this is a boom that probably won't bust anytime soon. You take a look at the population figures. Comparing Midland to similar-sized cities, it is the fastest growing in the country. They saw more than a 4% bump, according to census figures, almost the same in Odessa. And the oil companies right now are building giant permanent facilities all across Texas.
That's something. Thanks a lot, Scott. Ahead on Full Measure, tax-funded research stolen by foreign spies. At colleges and universities across America, innovative research funded with your tax dollars may be stolen by researchers who are actually foreign spies. The National Institutes of Health, which hands out billions of dollars in grants each year, has warned of systemic efforts by foreigners to divert intellectual property. Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, is pushing for better vetting.
Number one, some people do research in American institutions strictly to spy for their country, to either get national security or for intellectual property. It's wrong. There's billions of federal dollars go for research. Whether it's NIH, I suppose, is where we're most concerned about, but it could be other agencies as well. So we're having our intellectual property stolen. We may be affecting our national security and giving information to other countries about that or our plans. The federal bureaucracies like the NIH that puts the money out, they have a responsibility to make sure that the universities are vetting these researchers in a proper way.
Are there any particular countries of concern, more so than others?
My suspicion is China, but I wouldn't want to limit it to just China.
In 2013, foreign researchers at an American university were charged with conspiring to steal research for the benefit of the Chinese government. The foreigners were funded by a multi-million-dollar grant of U.S. tax dollars from the National Institutes of Health. Last year, the NIH was reportedly conducting investigations into several cases where researchers receiving federal tax money may have failed to disclose their financial ties to foreign governments. There was a recent IG report from HHS on all of this. Do you know what it concluded?
Yeah, it concluded that there wasn't proper vetting, the integrity of the program wasn't being protected, and that there was actually spying going on.
What is the risk to the American public if proper vetting isn't done?
I can't quantify it, but we know that there's been intellectual property stolen, so that affects the people that own the intellectual property. It discourages further research, and in some instances may affect the national security of our country.
Do you get the sense that someone is working on this issue, that it's going to get fixed?
I think that congressional oversight starts it. My work, your work, working together, I hope changes the behavior of bureaucrats, but not that the behavior is just do your job. Because if you aren't vetting it, the integrity of the program is in jeopardy. Taxpayers' money is being wasted. Our research is being stolen. National security might be affected. Just do your job.
The National Institutes of Health has convened a panel to crack down on research security and enforce rules that researchers disclose their foreign ties. Coming up on Full Measure, it's known as the Pentagon Slush Fund, and it may be about to get a major boost courtesy of your tax dollars. We follow the money. Important update to a story we first reported last year. Lisa Fletcher dug into a giant account that critics call the Pentagon Slush Fund. Now Lisa reports that fund could be about to get a new injection of money with you paying the bill, and critics in both parties worried about abuse.
The Overseas Contingency Operations Account, or OCO, was designed as a safety net for unplanned expenditures during times of war. Some say it's become a wiggle room for waste that no one's watching.
When you make these kind of gimmicks and play with the different accounts, it makes it unbelievably difficult to kind of hold the Pentagon accountable for Congress to do real oversight.
Ryan Alexander is the president of Taxpayers for Common Sense. She's been tracking spending by the Pentagon for years. The account is outside the Pentagon's budget, meaning it is not subject to spending limits set by law. Alexander claims that opens the door for out-of-bounds spending. In 2014, the Pentagon tried to shift $1.9 billion in overseas contingency operations funds to buy F-35s that weren't even working at the time. Congress ultimately rejected that request. Last year, $69 million in funds from the account were used for a detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, not an unplanned wartime expense. $66 million was spent on upgrades at a long-standing naval facility in Italy, also not unplanned or war-related. And a parking apron in Djibouti and an Army base in Cuba were also on the OCO tab, neither falling under the fund's requirements, according to critics. Spending like that has drawn longtime condemnation from both sides of the aisle.
There's been great concern on a bipartisan basis that OCO over the years has been used as a slush fund.
And it's really a way of cheating, a way of being dishonest in your accounting.
Critics once included current acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney before he worked for the Trump administration.
I'm here once again to talk about the Overseas Contingency Operation budget. My opinion of it by now should be no secret to anybody. I don't like it very much.
When he was in Congress in 2016, Mulvaney sponsored legislation to limit spending in the account. Now, the White House Budget Office wants a steep increase in OCO spending for 2020. The acting White House budget director faced questions about it during a House hearing on the budget request.
Now, let me ask you about OCO, which we call the slush fund. How much does the president propose cutting the Defense Department's slush fund in fiscal year 20?
We propose increasing the...
How much are you proposing to increase it by?
Increase it up to from $69 billion to $164 billion.
So you're proposing
$164 billion. Almost 1/4 of the entire proposed defense budget for 2020 is in the Overseas Contingency Operations Account. To put that in perspective, if OCO were a federal agency, it would have a bigger budget than most of the others, including the EPA and the Department of Justice.
The OCO account on its own would be the second largest agency.
What percentage of the OCO budget actually is for direct war spending?
Only 15% of the OCO budget is going to direct war spending, which you think about it, that's crazy.
Now, a White House budget official defended the request for more money to the fund in an op-ed. He wrote, "It is the only fiscally responsible option to meet national security needs while not exceeding spending caps created by Congress." Coming up on Full Measure, a creepy corner with ties to one of our founding fathers. Next week on Full Measure, we analyze the current media madness and public trust in our industry.
What's happening is we have a world where people look at journalists like they look at Wikipedia. Gee, that's an interesting fact. I better check it myself.
Results of a new Full Measure poll about the media next week. Our final story shows that it's possible to find history hidden in plain sight. Some descendants of George Washington may be buried in a most unlikely place. Josie Sturman takes us to a little-known corner in Decatur, Georgia.
Behind this locked door,
it's like creepy.
up a set of musty concrete stairs, is an historic mausoleum like no other. It's not the age of the graves or the significance of the people buried here that makes it unique. It's the unfortunate location.
So here we are.
You think they'd have a sense of humor about the fact of where they ended up?
I would find it funny.
This mausoleum sits in a Walmart parking lot, and it's just a cart ride away from an auto parts store, too.
It holds generations of family related to a man named Brenton Head.
On my dad's mother's side, her family is buried in a Target parking lot in Woodstock, so I have it on both sides.
On this side, it's the Crawley Mausoleum in Decatur, Georgia, with graves that date as far back as the early 1800s. Brenton's family owned this land for decades. It was leased in the 1960s to make way for a mall, with the cemetery protected as a private deeded property smack dab in the middle. Many people didn't and still don't have any idea what it is. So tales of this crypt have taken a funny turn.
This was the tomb of the unknown shoppers.
The solo stone structure has been a thing of mystery for years. Overgrown, both tucked away and in plain sight, it's drawn the curious, the daring, and sometimes destructive.
We've actually had homeless people living in and in front of the cemetery. We've actually walked up on people up on top having sex in the cemetery. So we try to keep it locked up, but this door gets broken into about once a month.
Security is something new here. So is the family connection. Brenton and other family members found each other on Facebook a couple years ago. They started organizing regular cleanup parties.
When we first came up here in the beginning, this was like 2015, this whole top looked like jungle.
Together, they cleared away the brush that covered up this link to their past. But the family hasn't been able to clear up some lingering questions. No one knows exactly how many are buried here and in which spots. But DNA did tell them this place has some famous ties. These graves in some way connect to George Washington's family.
George Washington's brother, Samuel, is my 10 times great-grandfather on my mother's father's Crowley's side. We always thought there was something special about this because it wasn't normal for them to do this. And then once we kind of made that connection, all that stuff, it kind of made sense.
It's hard to make sense of seeing something so old, so revered, sitting in the center of a place so commercial. The family looks at it like a monument to history and how time changes all. I'm Josie Sturman for Full Measure.
By the way, Walmart pays the taxes on the land. There's a new way you can watch Full Measure on our new streaming service, Stir. You can download the app on your phone. It's also available on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire. Now you can watch Full Measure anytime, anywhere on Stir. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable.